Legends of the prophet Elijah abound in Jewish tradition. We tell countless stories of Elijah roaming the earth, performing miracles, and providing spiritual and physical healing. The rabbinic sages spoke of encountering this mystical Elijah, how he would weigh in on their legal conversations, answering questions, offering advice. And we're familiar with the tradition that Elijah is the one who will announce the arrival of the Messianic age and the redemption of Israel, celebrated in a song sung at the end of Shabbat during the Havdalah service, which prays for Elijah's return speedily and in our time. We pray for the same at every Passover Seder. We even set a special chair for Elijah at every baby naming and bris. And the idea is, may this child, may this new week or this new spring herald the coming of a better world, a perfected world, a world without pain and suffering. Elijah was a powerful prophet in the 9th century of BCE whose successes were legendary. And yet, even with this tremendous power of God behind him, Elijah reached a point when he was ready to quit. Having bested all the false prophets of Baal, the king and the queen remain non-believers, and Elijah then runs away, fearing for his life, and he collapses under a juniper tree. He prays for death. He says, "It's enough now, O God. Take my soul, for I am no better than my ancestors." And the sages understand that Elijah is experiencing a common, very human condition, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Elijah feels burdened, anxious, overwhelmed, crushed by the sheer volume of what he's dealing with. An angel attempts to rouse him from sleep, offering him food and water, but cannot revive his spirit. Elijah eats a little bit and then goes back to sleep. The days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the Yamim Noraim, Norah, from the Hebrew Yirah, which can mean awe. The High Holy Days are a time of awe as they mark the cycle of completion, the beginning of a new year. Most likely, you think about the High Holy Days as the days of awe. And awe is a potent dynamic of these days. They're days in which we set aside our daily lives in order to concentrate on big ideas, big questions, big emotions. And the Machzor asks us to imagine ourselves standing directly before God, to experience the awe of God's majesty and reverence as our sovereign inscribes our judgment. The image is at the same time challenging, distant, while also resonant and compelling. But the word norah, yirah, it doesn't only mean awe. In fact, on its surface, in both biblical and modern Hebrew, a closer translation for yirah is fear or anxiety. It would be just as correct to translate these Yamim Noraim as the days of anxiety, which I have to say seems especially appropriate this year. It would be unsurprising if most of us tonight are more connected with a generalized fear within rather than awe. Inherent in the concept of God's judgment of humanity is a raw existential anxiety and uncertainty. The High Holy Days force us to confront the limits of the human condition, our fragility, our mortality, and the terrifying lack of control we have over our fate. We are spiritually on trial. And as we review our lives on Yom Kippur, we become more aware of the many spiritual trials we have faced this year. In fact, these days are put before us precisely to awaken our troubled souls, to ensure that we confront anxiety rather than turn away or hide from it. the Yamim Noraim. They ask us not to turn away from inner turmoil, unrest, discontent, but instead to name that and to sit with it for the day, and then to look to our tradition for some remedy. We need answers this year more than ever. And when Yom Kippur ends and we hammer in that first nail into the sukkah, we should then feel some relief that the anxieties that laid bare during the holy days might torment us less. Because while so much is uncertain and out of control, we still have agency. And we pray to feel transformed by the Yamim Noraim. We pray for a collective calming, refocusing that might then continue through the year as we wrestle with anxiety and uncertainty. We pray that today, at the end of the day, we might feel stability and security, connection and comfort. In the 20 years that I've been a rabbi, I have never borne witness to as much fear and anxiety from members of our congregation as I have in this past year. Here's just a sample of what you shared with me. You worry about the state of our country, as so many feel the reverberations of attacks on our democratic institutions and values. You worry about the state of relationships, the lack of empathy or grace that we offer one another, the ever-constricting silos of community that we find ourselves in. You worry about rising anti-Semitism, the fate of Jews around the world. You worry about our Jewish students on college campuses, ill-equipped to handle the increasing pressures placed upon them by complacent or fearful administrations and less than supportive faculty and staff. You worry about increasingly repressive policies that threaten free speech. And this while also worrying about the advancement of dangerous hate speech. You worry about Israel and our precious hostages, as well as the ongoing tragic war in Gaza that threatens Israel's security from beyond her borders and threatens her soul from within her borders. You worry whether our youngest children will be spared from gun violence while at school, at events in their places of worship. You feel anxiety about the world that we are leaving to our children. You fear global warming, fear for America's future among the nations. The list goes on and on. Our hearts race just hearing the list. We shift uncomfortably in our seats. And who are we not to worry about these issues of profound magnitude? These realities are painful. None of us are immune to these feelings of instability and fear. For many of us, there have been sleepless nights, a feeling that we are losing our way. We vacillate between helpless rage and hopelessness. Like Elijah, we want to run away, retreat, just hide under a tree. We've lost our ability to cope, to think, to act. We've ground to a complete emotional halt. In such a state of fear and anxiety, it is impossible for us to be reflective. We lose perspective. Our very ability to manage difficulty diminishes. We are uncertain even where to begin. And then the liturgy of Yom Kippur compounds these feelings. The Machzor, in addition to its poetic beauty, it's literally a collection of Jewish anxieties. Jews have always been expert at anxiety. Remember the old joke about the telegram, which reads, "Start worrying, details to follow." So we're a neurotic people. And the day of Yom Kippur is our prime example. Just try to imagine any other religion asking its followers to spend an entire day thinking about all the ways some of us will die in the coming year. That's the imagery of Unatana Tokef, that we pass before God as sheep passing beneath the staff, wondering who will live, who will die. We read God reviews and counts, judging every living being, determining the fate of everyone. Even the angels are seized with fear and trembling as they declare, the day of judgment is here. Unatana Tokef lays bare our core existential fears, demanding answers to anxiety-riddled questions. On Rosh Hashanah is written, and Yom Kippur it is sealed, who shall live and who shall die? Who by fire and who by water? There are surely no more terrifying words in today's liturgy. The anxiety of Unatana Tokef is not a theoretical scare tactic for us to face death in some abstract way. Rabbi Ed Feinstein points out that these are questions, each of them, and that each question has a real answer. The Unatana Tokef is not an abstract philosophical expression. It is our life's journey. He writes, I sat in shul for years reading these words before I realized the answer. The answer to each of these questions is me. It is a frightfully succinct summary of my existence. So now I read it again, but in the first person, and it makes me shiver. I will live, and I will die, at the right time and before my time. I will wander, but I might yet find rest. I will be troubled, but I may achieve tranquility. This is the central truth of the High Holy Days. This is what makes them days of anxiety. Sickness, wandering, natural disasters, financial issues. It's all there in the text of the Machzor. What's coming? We all worry about our families, our community, our country, Israel, and the world. And this year, many of our fears have borne out in the world around us. If we were to interpret the confessional prayer that we just completed, the Vidui, as an alphabetical list of anxiety rather than sin, it would be easy for us to fill an entire alphabet with our fears. Perhaps it would feel good to get them off our chest. In the past year, we have felt anxiety over Aleph, anti-Semitism, and Bet, broken trust in our institutions, Gimel, global conflicts, Daled, disinformation. We have worried about Hey, housing and healthcare crises, Vav, gun violence and mass shootings. We are overwhelmed. We are afraid. We are drained. So how are we to concentrate on the awe of this day, the aspect of the Yamim Noraim that elevates us, that lifts us out of anxiety, that turns us toward acceptance and wonder, ultimately to action, if we are unable to see past our own fear? The narrative of Elijah, the prophet, offers a profound spiritual and psychological response. God offers Elijah three specific responses to his anxious despair. First, an angel appears and touches Elijah and offers him food and drink. And even when Elijah lies back down, the angel reappears, offering this basic sustenance again. The angel's offering is not grand, but it is profound. For the angel is acknowledging Elijah's fundamental human need. When we are spiritually and emotionally burdened, it becomes a radical act to offer care, just reaching out for human connection that nourishes body and spirit. And sometimes we need to reach out to each other more than once. Our spirits are so burdened that each act of care and connection accumulates, begins to lift us. In Elijah's case, The second time the angel reappears and offers care, Elijah is nourished. He feels renewed strength, enough to make the journey to the mountain of Horeb to seek God. Then once on the mountaintop, God appears to Elijah and asks a deceptively simple question. What are you doing here, Elijah? In this moment, the all-knowing and all-powerful God seems to be demonstrating something quite transformative. God is offering Elijah a listening ear. We might expect God in this moment to lecture Elijah, or at least to know his heart without needing to be told it. But God gives Elijah something, provides him the chance to express his pain and his burden, and God listens. So many of the real issues facing us in life today are rooted in our inability to listen and to hear one another. In our anxiety, we end up feeling isolated and unheard. But we know that fear diminishes in relationship when we allow ourselves to share deep fear and burden. The experience of being heard lightens the load. Having our feelings reflected back to us is calming and anchoring and helps us to return to center. We learn from Elijah that listening to one another is a powerful tool in quelling anxiety. Centuries of Jewish philosophy have taught us the same thing. And yet it seems that what we know in our minds, it's more complicated to absorb with our hearts. So here we sit together at Kol Nidre in much the same way as we sat last year and the year before. And we ask God through our prayers, what is wrong with us that we still have not learned these most fundamental lessons? How do we still wonder where and how we might feel God in our lives? We become so lost in the noise and the fear that we become in danger of losing ourselves. The German Jewish philosopher Martin Buber was perhaps the most succinct in reminding us that we connect with God when we connect with each other. He wrote, when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. A person cannot approach the divine by reaching beyond the human. To become fully human, this is what we have been created for. We connect, he says, through inquiry, through listening, through our witness of one another. The answers that we seek, they are right in front of us. And yet it takes the sacred day of Yom Kippur before we notice. Buber also taught us all of life is encounter, teaching that only when we reach out to one another do we find God. So after God hears Elijah's pleas, God tells him to stand at the top of the mountain, and a strong wind surrounds Elijah, splitting rocks in two on the mountaintop. But the text tells us God was not in the wind. Next, an earthquake happens under Elijah's feet, and we are told that God is again not in the earthquake. And then finally, a fire breaks out all around him, but God was not in the fire. And then we read in the text, and after the fire, a still small voice. So often, the swirling chaos of our world might feel to us like a raging fire, an earthquake threatening to tear us apart. And we seek a lifeline, some assurance that we can weather the storm, once again stand on firm ground. God doesn't appear to us in the form of burning bushes or splitting seas. In fact, when we find ourselves in the midst of life's great storms, it may seem as if God has abandoned us entirely, and God was not in the fire. God is most recognizable in our lives as that still small voice, a kol demama daka, God is the voice within us which speaks to us only when we have quieted the noisy chaos around us and within us. It becomes easy to lose this quiet voice of God because it sounds like the mindful, wise part of ourselves, and it's easy to lose that, especially when the noise of the world, the wind, the earthquakes, the fires become as loud as they have been this year. Yet each of us owns this divine wisdom within, if we but remember how to quiet ourselves enough to hear it. It is a still, small voice. It provides subtle instructions for your next simple, constructive steps that your fearful mind cannot hear. The still, small voice, guiding us to break free from paralyzing fear and to reconnect with purpose. Like Elijah, we are each of us right now alone on a mountaintop at Kol Nidre. And we feel the battering winds, the raging fires, the earth shaking beneath our feet. But unlike Elijah, we are also surrounded by the presence of community, those who have sustained us in the past and who can learn to do so again. And together tonight, we seek to shift our focus to be able to return to our life's purpose once we have calmed fear and reconnected with God's voice ourselves. After Elijah's experience with God on the mountaintop, God has one more important lesson to teach him about dealing with fear and anxiety. God sets Elijah on a new task, sends him to work. He is to anoint 2 new kings, as well as his own successor, Elisha. And together, they will pick up God's work where Elijah left off. God has allowed the prophet time to feel everything he needed to feel, and then told him to get up and return to life and get to work again. Elijah learns to use his worry about the world to take necessary steps then to change it. In doing so, his return, his teshuvah, puts his life back into motion. So here we are in our days of anxiety, when we can and will turn back towards each other. Our teshuvah today, acknowledging these worries and fears, admitting them to one another, can put us back on the road to stronger relationship and stronger communities. There is much work for us to do this year. We must address each of these anxieties, resolve them. And our congregation has always been a home for us to do this, for us not only to nurture and care for each other in our celebrations and in our mourning, but for decades. This has been the place which reminds us, in the words of the Talmud, Al tifrosh min hatzibor, do not separate yourselves from the ills of society. Together, we stand at the mountaintop and we weather the storms of building a stronger community and a stronger world. Tonight, we pray that we may find peace in our hearts in the coming year, peace in our families, peace in the world. We pray that God hears these, our fears, and offers consolation. May we learn to provide comfort to one another through acts of care and kindness, and by offering a listening ear. May we lean on one another for support and encouragement. May we then transcend fear to return to the divine purpose that lives within each of us. Let us recognize God's instruction to get back to work. As we pray for a year of life and blessing, may God grant us the humility to know that each of us is one among many, but that we each have a role to play in completing Elijah's work, ushering in a better world. May God grant us the strength to make this difference for good, to face our fears together, and to take steps towards action in the coming year.